Hello everybody, and thank you very much for joining us on the Curriculum 2019 briefing for our new or relatively new learners. My name's Jane Barrett and I'm going to be facilitating this session today. This presentation is designed specifically around the needs of those individuals who have or are about to join the IFoA, either with or without exemptions. There'll be two contributors, Chris, who will address the curriculum, its content, structure and exemptions, and Matt, who will specifically address the PPD requirements. We're going to hold questions for the end, and there's a facility where you can type your questions through to me. I've just been asking some of you to just type in where in the world you're dialing in from, where you're listening from, just so that you know where the question box is. So if you could go ahead and do that right now, that would be great. But we will hold the questions to the end, and then I will be passing them to the presenters to address. So I'll be keeping an eye on that as we go through. The webinar is recorded and you'll be sent a link when it's uploaded and where you can find it on the website. So I think that's it, Chris. So over to you, and the floor's yours.
Jane, thank you very much indeed. Well, hello everybody. As Jane said, I'm Chris Bristow. I'm head of the Education Partnerships and Lifelong Learning team here at the IFoA, based out in Oxford, and have been quite closely associated with the development of the Curriculum 19 material since I arrived in the role a couple of years back. So thank you all for joining us. As Jane said, this is designed specifically for those individuals who are relatively new or have not yet joined the IFoA. And conscious that that many of you will have some exemptions you're claiming from your university degree program. But I thought perhaps it would be useful just to give a little bit of background as to the rationale, if you like, for the 2019 curriculum, if you like. We haven't actually reviewed the curriculum in any substantial way since 2005, and there was recognition some 3 or 4 years ago that actually this needed to be remedied. The whole nature of the work of actuaries is changing, the global environment is changing, the role of actuaries in organizations is changing, and we're seeing more actuaries involved in non-traditional areas of work than perhaps we've seen in the past. So a need to update what we were doing. We also work very closely with the other actuarial associations around the world, and they were also at the same time planning to introduce changes, revising their own curricula for their own members. And much of that was in fact driven by the International Actuarial Association that introduced a new core syllabus which went live in November 2017. So we were ahead of the game, and just rest assured that the mapping of our syllabus to the IAA syllabus is absolutely being completed, and we're on message as far as that's concerned. So we now have a very relevant and internationally appealing curriculum for all our members, and reflect, I suppose, on the number of people taking our examinations. All right, so what will the 2019 curriculum accomplish? First of all, we're introducing new learning materials. All the core reading has been updated. We've been working very closely with our partners ActEd, who provide much of the learning materials, updated, refreshed, and containing the information that you now need to know that reflects that syllabus that we talked about, the IAA syllabus, which we're now completely aligned with. We wanted to develop a more balanced curriculum between the technical skills required of actuaries and the more softer skills that employers are telling us that they are looking for in their actuarial students, their trainees. We've introduced some new assessments, and those of you who've done some reading around the curriculum 2019 will know that in the CS, the core statistics, and the core mathematics, the CM subjects, we now have papers which are what we're calling problem-based, which are very much around the application of knowledge to dealing with real-life actuarial problems. And there are examples of those on the 2019 website. We're using more and more technology to deliver those examinations. We'll have 7 assessments that are delivered online. And we've also developed a new module structure, the module team structure. And this is to make sure that the curriculum is maintained and kept up to date on an annual basis. And I think that's very important because I don't think that was really happening before. So just to reassure you that there's been wide consultation in developing this curriculum, which has been developed for, I suppose, the last 3 years. You can see there's a range of stakeholders there, including our employers. Very important for us to make sure that the students who are coming out with the actuarial examinations are able to deal with the issues and the problems that are being dealt to them by their employers. We talked to other learning providers, and that will also include our accredited and partnered universities. More and more of those around the world now that are offering actuarial science and actuarial management that are attracting exemptions for their students. We've also talked a lot to our students. We have a student consultative forum where we receive feedback on a regular basis, and that's been important to put into the mix too. There are, of course, all the volunteers and all those people who are involved in setting examinations and are involved in writing the core reading. Those tend to be both academics but also practitioners, actuaries who are working in the field, so to speak. We touched on the international associations, the other associations that mirror what the IFoA are doing. We also have to keep in contact with the regulators, the FRC, and we have also drawn feedback from our international and national members. So you can see a very wide consultation to make sure that what we produce is fit for purpose. Okay, so what is actually changing? I think it's important that you know, and I mentioned in my introduction about the module team structure, this is very new and it's designed to ensure that the curriculum is reviewed on a regular basis. Not necessarily to make huge changes, but we could do if we needed to do. This is just to make sure that on an annual basis, we are reflecting what's happening in the marketplace. We regularly reach out to our employers and to our students and to make sure that the subjects are relevant and fresh. We'll have a module lead that will have responsibility for the module team, and they will be supported by the education actuaries that work out of Oxford and subject matter experts that we draw upon. And then around the assessment, we have a chief examiner, and he or she will have a team of examiners and assistant examiners. For those of you who don't know, examiners are very much involved in question setting, and the assistant examiners do all the hard work, all the marking that follows on from that. But that will all be under the direction of the module lead. So that's a really important and significant change to the way in which we operate the professional examinations. Okay, many of you will have noticed that we are introducing some new subjects, and if we start right at the very beginning, the core modules as we like to call them, then we've got 4 new subjects that are replacing 6 existing subjects, and a bit more about that in a second. So actuarial statistics 1 and 2 and actuarial mathematics 1 and 2, and for each of those subjects there will be 2 elements of assessment. There'll be a paper-based exam sat in an exam center, and there'll be this computer-based assessment, much shorter, using either Excel or R, and a bit more about that too. And you'll notice that I put there in brackets as well, or by the side, the amount of time you have to sit those exams. In the past, for most of our exams, we've had 15 minutes reading time. We've decided this time round to actually give you that time to decide how you want to use it. So that's why we've got 3 hours 15 minutes and 1 hour 45 minutes to replace the 3 hour and the new 1.5 hour paper. So that just reflecting a different treatment of our students than perhaps we've done before. A bit more detail then about those. Actuarial statistics is most of those of you who've come through the university route and have got your exemptions. That's most of CT3. And the practical assessment for CS1 will be using R. CS2 is CT4 and CT6, with also using R in the practical assessment there. Actual mathematics 1 is CT1 and CT5, and actual mathematics 2 is CT8, but both of those, CM1 and CM2, using Excel as the problem-based assessment software package. Now, those are important for those of you who are holding exemptions, and when you when you trade in your exemptions, if you like, when you join the IFoA, then they'll be mapped straight across to the new curriculum, so you don't have to do that. But you'll notice that in 2 of those subjects, CS2 and CM1, there are pairings, and I'll say a little bit more about that when we come to talk about the exemptions right at the very end of my element of the presentation. But just bear that in mind as we go through. So that's the CSs and the CMs. Those are the core modules. Those of you who've done actual science or actual management at university will probably have most of those under your belt. So you'll be able to claim exemptions from those in the normal way. Now we move on to the business subjects, which is CB1 and CB2 and CB3. So CB1 and CB2, very closely aligned to CT2 and CT7. Very common exemptions in university actual science programs. Not significant changes to those. The CB1 and CB2 both have a 3-hour written paper. There'll be some multiple choice type questions at the beginning, followed by some shorter answer questions. And then CB3, which is the old CT9, which will follow the same assessment format. It'll be an online assessment, and the syllabus is similar, but it's been updated, and that updating process is going on now as we speak. So it'll be refreshed, internationally relevant to our learners. So that's CB1, CB2, and CB3. Now we move into what some people regard as a slightly more difficult subject. So this is the old CA1, CA2, and CA3. So the CAs have been replaced by the CPs. You'll see that in CP1, there's some additional material on data management and control. We've removed some of the duplication that we found that was cropping up in the STs, but the changes are minimal, except in the assessment, where whilst we've always had 2 papers for CA1, we'll have 2 papers for CP1, but the second paper will be a written case study. And if you look at the Curriculum 2019 web pages, you'll see an example of what that case study looks like. So that's a different format than we've seen before, but again, the same length of time. In the written case study, you'll notice that we still retain 45 minutes planning time. That's because we believe that in the assessment, in the written case study, you do need time to read through the case study and get an indication, if you like, of exactly what the examiner is looking for and what the context of the case study is as well. So that's the only one way we retain that preparation time. CP2, this is the modeling, documentation, analysis and reporting module. This is all about communicating to a technical audience. Some universities are now offering CP2, so some of you may be carrying an exemption to CP2 with you. And the assessment there is 2 computer-based exams using Excel. And then CP3, well, CP3's been around for a little bit now. It was introduced in September 2017. This is the old CA3. And this is, unlike CP2, communicating to a non-technical audience. We've repositioned CP3, so we've done away with the presentation. And most of you will have covered presentation skills at universities if you've come up that route. This is just a written paper. And with this, again, something new, we released pre-reading 3 days ahead of the written examination. So you understand the context in which this assessment has been set. So that's CP3. Okay, I'm not going to say much about PPD because my colleague Matt next to me is going to talk about that in more detail, but I put it up here because it's an integral part of the route to qualification, and that has changed quite significantly from the old work-based skills that some of you may have heard about, but more about that from him a little bit later on. For some of you, again, if you've been to Kent, to Cass and to Heriot Watt universities, you may have picked up an SP if you did a master's program. The changes to the later subjects have not been significant except in the finance area. So SA5 and SA6 have been withdrawn and replaced by a new module called SA7, which is an investment and finance module. Those of you who might have been holding SA5 or SA6 will continue, they'll still be valid. But what we have done in the later subjects is, again, to reflect on an international group of exam takers, is we've removed a lot of the UK legislation and regulation, and we've moved that to a separate set of core reading for those individuals who need to do the later modules, the practice modules that come after people have qualified. So the SA subjects have definitely become less UK focused. And it may well be that as the curriculum moves forward, there will be new subjects that we added to the specialist subjects. But the requirement is still to do 2 SP subjects and 1 SA subjects if you're following on to the fellowship route. Okay, so the transition arrangements are straightforward, and we try to keep them as simple as possible. But they do rely on individuals holding these pairings around CT1 and CT5 and CT4 and CT6. So in order to get an exemption in CM1, you need to have completed CT1 and CT5. And if you are holding hoping for an exemption to CS2, then you need to be holding CT4 and CT6. Those are the only pairings that are required in order to read across to the new curriculum. The others map directly across, so CT2 to CB1, CT7 to CB2, CT3 to CS1, and then CT8 to CM2 and CT9 to CB3. So those are important in order to be able to claim those exemptions from the new CM and CS subjects. Most universities have been working with their students to try and ensure that that can be done on the program, and we have been notifying students for the last 3 years, if they hold one of those but not both, that they need to complete that pairing in order to claim. If you haven't got those pairings now, and I know some of you may be waiting your results, but if you haven't got those by the end of December, then you're going to have to retake or have to take the new subject. Okay, so that's transition. Little bit about support. The website has got a lot of information on it, including a set of FAQs, which we're adding to the whole time. There's information about the curriculum 2019. There's a guide, the syllabuses are all there, and we've included sample examination papers and sample answer papers as well for those of you who are preparing for those exams, which I'll remind you are being run for the very first time in April 2019. We, as the IFoA, sell core reading ourselves, and you can get that through the eShop. But ACTED are the providers of the learning materials, and they run a range of courses and support, some of it face-to-face, some of it online, and that's really ready, up and running as we speak. We provided, under the CS subjects, we provided a technical guide to R, and that's how R should be downloaded, giving you some practice about using it for those of you who haven't. The exam dates are now up for the exams going forward, and there's a large element of information about PPD, which Matt will say a little bit more about as well. I think the very important thing to remember if you're a student who've been through university and you're holding a number of exemptions, but you haven't, if you like, traded or cashed them in, then you've got until 2023 to do that. So those of you who are holding CTs, subjects, CTs 1 to 8 normally, and some of you may be holding some SP subjects, then you've got until 2023 to make sure that those are traded in, if you like, to map across to the new curriculum. So that's an important date extra on mind. We will be reminding you as we go through about that date in the next few years. Okay, so I think that's all I want to say, Jane, about the curriculum 2019 as an introduction. As I said, a lot of information on the website, and I would encourage you to be looking at that now. So that's all from me.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Chris.
Right, hi everyone. My name is Matt Tennyson. I'm the quality manager here at the IFoA, and just the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to take you through what is called PPD, or Personal and Professional Development, which is the work experience aspect of your qualification journey en route to becoming a qualified associate or fellow. So I'll take you through what the PPD framework is. what you need to gain in terms of your qualification requirements, what we mean by PPD records, and then we'll finish off by a demonstration of what uploading a PPD record actually looks like. So in terms of what PPD actually is, alongside your examinations that you sit as a student with the IFoA, you are required to record a number of years of work experience alongside your exams, which you must do before you come to qualify. So to get to the associateship level, you need to have at least 1 year of work experience recorded. And to get to the fellowship level, you need to have a minimum of 3 years recorded. It is a minimum, and you are expected to record your work experience every single year that you are a student with us, and I'll talk to you about that a bit later. So the work experience is a completely separate requirement to your exams, and you must complete it as a student in order to qualify. So what is the PPD framework then? So the recording of work experience is very important for students of the IFoA because it shows that you can do essentially these 3 things. So whereas the examinations are the test of your academic and theoretical knowledge of the actuarial practice, we want to see your ability to demonstrate those skills within the workplace. So at the same time that you're taking exams, you're gaining that knowledge and skills through your revision and the exam environment. When you do your PPD, that's showing those particular skill sets within your everyday work. The business environment that our students find themselves these days is a very changing and flexible environment, and we want to see your understanding of the sectors, the professions, the fields and the work that you undertake, and also that how you develop your own professional and ethical understanding of those considerations in your everyday practice. And then the third reason is because PPD is around a reflective practice. So a piece of terminology that you will understand as you go through your student journey is that once you become a qualified member of the IFoA as an associate or a fellow, you have what's called your CPD, your continued professional development requirements. And PPD and CPD are 2 separate aspects. So your PPD is your work experience recording before you come to qualify, and your CPD is your continued professional requirements after you come to qualify with us. So there are two separate requirements, but all of them reflect on your learning, your development and your practice. So that's a little bit of background to why the work experience recording is so important before you come to qualify. So what is PPD? So there are 3 main categories. Well, there are 4 categories in total, but there are 3 main categories that we're interested in seeing your skill set from: effective communication, problem solving and decision making, and professionalism. So that within those 3 categories, there are a whole range of areas that we're interested in seeing you demonstrate your skills and experience in. The 4th category is formal learning. So what training courses, what development activity have you undertaken as a student on your route to qualification? Within 3 of those categories, as I've mentioned, the communication, problem solving and professionalism, there are a whole number of different competencies that you can pick and choose from. There are 30 different areas that we've listed of practice that we think students should be able to demonstrate and show within the workplace. You don't have to show all of them, but there are particular skills that we expect qualified actuaries to be able to show. And those particular skills have a credit value, which I will talk about in a second. So your qualification requirements then. So to become an associate, you need to have a minimum of 12 months experience recorded in your PPD portal, and I'll show you where that is later. By the time you have your year experience, you need to have 10 credits, so 10 PPD credits logged in your system. Every year that you are a student member of the IFoA, you need to have at least 3 credits logged in your system by the end of your PPD year, and I'll tell you what that year looks like. And as I mentioned, 2 formal learning activities, so training courses, events, conferences, development days. To become a fellow, you need to have a minimum of 36 months, so 3 years worth of experience recorded in the system. You have to have 20 credits, so 20 credits worth of activity logged as a minimum. And again, each year that you're a student member of the IFoA, you need to record a minimum of 3 credits per year and 2 formal learning hours as well. So if you are a member with us for 10 years, it takes you 10 years to qualify, and you record the minimum of 3 per year, you will actually finish off on 30 credits, so you will have more than enough experience over those couple of years. It is the minimum requirements per year, so we do recommend that students aim for slightly more than 3, because they may find themselves qualifying much shorter than expected. So the more per year that you log in your system, the more credits that you have recorded. So that's an overview of what students need in able to qualify alongside their exams. So 12 months for associate and 10 credits, 36 months for fellow and 20 credits total. So now I'm going to take you through the category areas of PPD, and I will talk about the competencies and what they mean. So the first competency area is effective communication. So this area is all about your communication skills, your written ability, and your ability to communicate actuarial results. So as I've mentioned, there is a whole shopping list of things that you can pick and choose from as a student. You do not have to do all of them, and you have to pick the areas which link best into the things that you do within your everyday work and profession. So down the left-hand column, you can see all the different competencies that are available to you. Contribute to actual reports of regulators, prepare communications plans, provide comprehensive summaries of technical actuarial results. So some are slightly more actuarial in nature, some are slightly more generic. If you can see down the middle column, there is the credit. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, there you have to have the number of credits recorded before you come to qualify. So when you record certain competencies in your PPD portal, those credits will add up. So some competencies are worth 2 credits and some competencies are worth 1 credit. So you have to make a judgment about, do you go for the slightly higher valued credits or do you go for the slightly lower value? In each of the 3 areas, there is a mandatory one. So the mandatory competency in effective communication is present the results of actuarial work to an informed but non-technical audience. So you don't have to do this every year, but you have to ensure that the mandatory competencies are completed before you come to qualify. So all students have to do the same mandatory areas. So if we pick one of the competencies in a bit more detail, then present the results of actuarial work to an informed but non-technical audience, we give some examples of the types of activity that you could align to that particular competency when you're coming to submit your evidence. So here are just some examples. As I've mentioned, that would be worth 2 credits. So if you recorded this activity, you would have 2 credits logged in your system, and there is a mandatory area. So you would have to do that before you come to qualify. The next area is problem solving and decision making. Here is the slightly more technical aspect and slightly more the technical skills that we would expect students to be able to show and demonstrate. So for example, analyze and validate a data set from a model, distinguish between material and immaterial factors from a model, determine whether all material factors have been considered when designing a solution. So here is the more technical aspect of the skills that we expect students to be able to show within the workplace. Again, some are worth 2 credits and some are worth 1. And the mandatory area in this field is analyze and prioritize stakeholder needs when designing solutions. So that is one that you would have to complete before you come to qualify. To zoom in on one in a bit more detail, here is competency 2.4, analyze and validate the results from a model. And here is some types of activities that you could go, oh, I think I have done something similar to this. I think I'm therefore going to submit that competency. So that would be worth 2 credits, and that isn't a mandatory area, but that is a competency that a lot of students are submitting because that tends to be what they do on a quite frequent basis. So On to the last area then, which is professionalism, a very important area in terms of future actuaries' skill sets. So this area is all about understanding your professional and ethical considerations when you are undertaking your work. Slightly smaller range of competencies that you can pick and choose from, but there is a range of things that you can decide. Some are worth 2 credits and some are worth 1. Within this competency area, there are 2 mandatory competencies that you need to pick and choose from. So you must demonstrate an understanding of the role of the professional ethical standards in actuaries' work. And the second mandatory one is demonstrate the understanding of the role of peer review in a professional's work. So again, those are the ones that you have to complete before you come to qualify. Some are worth 2 credits, some are worth 1. And just to zoom in a bit closer on one of them, justify professional opinion in the face of questioning, so competency 3.9. And here are some of the examples and some things that you could discuss when you're submitting your PPD logs. So that's a very brief overview over the 3 areas then. So effective communication, problem solving and decision making, and professionalism. If you go onto the IFoA's website and have a look at our PPD guide, we discuss these 3 areas in a lot more detail and provide examples on all of those 30 competencies that you can pick and choose from. So in terms of the mandatory areas, as I've mentioned, they all must be completed before you come to qualify. We would prefer that you not submit them on a frequent basis, but you can do if that's something that you do frequently within your workplace, but you do not have to submit them on an annual basis. It is only when you come to qualify. So in terms of what an actual PPD record is, in terms of what we expect students to submit online, and I'll show you what this looks like a bit later. So there are 2 parts of your PPD record. The first is your activity description. So that's the first bit about when you come to upload a record. This is a very short piece of the PPD submission. It's capped at 250 characters, so you must be quite brief. You need to put around 3 to 4 sentences as a maximum, and it really should be a brief overview of that activity. We don't require too much detail here. So here is an example about when you come to upload your PPD records of what we would expect to see in a PPD record, and here is a good example of what that would look like. So it's quite brief, but it does cover enough detail about what is actually required in a activity description. And if you were to submit 1.6, that would be enough to meet our requirements. So the second part of the learning outcome. Now here is where we expect to see the majority of the detail. So you have 1,024 characters, so you have quite a lot more to complete. We would expect to see between 100 to 200 words of submission per PPD record. And most importantly, this is where you need to contain the reflective aspect of PPD. So what went well, what didn't go well, what were the success or failure factors? Was your work peer reviewed? What was the feedback? What would you do the same and what would you do differently next time? So it's about reflecting on that activity and highlighting essentially what was your understanding of how that activity went. Again, here is an example of a good practice log. So if you were submitting competency 1.11, prepare permanent documentation for a defined work product. Here is the type of thing that we would expect students to submit. So again, giving a bit of a description of what that activity entailed, reflecting on what the feedback was, what the comments they received from that piece of work, and again, what would they do differently next time. So here the student has reflected upon not using excessive detail in messages, and also thinking about the audience in terms of tailoring future messages. So again, if you were to submit a PPD activity, a learning outcome using that particular material, that would be more than acceptable when you're looking at your PPD records. So in terms of monitoring your PPD, here are some quite important things to think about. So Every student at the IFoA will have what's called a PPD submission deadline, and this deadline is the joining date of the IFoA. So, say for example, you joined the IFoA on the 10th of October 2018. Your PPD year will always start on the 10th of October each year and finish on the 9th of October the previous year. So for those who have joined us already this autumn and have joined us recently, you are now in your first PPD year. So your deadline will be somewhere in the autumn 2019, and it will be the date of which you joined the IFoA. So for students who haven't joined us, once your membership is approved with the IFoA, you start your first PPD year immediately. So that's a very important thing just to note in terms of your PPD deadline. So once your deadline passes, you may be subject to what's called a PPD audit, and this means that we will have a look at your PPD records, we will contact your supervisor, and we will essentially give you some feedback in terms of the quality of your logs. It's very important that when you are thinking about submitting your PPD records, you discuss them with your line manager, your supervisor, your senior manager, whoever is responsible for you and your employers, and you record those details within your PPD records, because as part of the PPD audits, we will be checking your supervisor to make sure that what you're talking about in your records is accurate and correct. If you miss your PPD deadline, so say for example your deadline is on the 8th of or the 9th of October 2019, and you miss your deadline and there isn't the 3 credits and 2 formal learning hours, you will be subject to an admin fee to backdate your records. The longer you leave it, the more severe those admin fees and those potential penalties are. The longer and longer you leave your PPD records incomplete, you may be subject to being suspended from sitting exams, and even in more serious circumstances, you may be suspended from being an IFoA student member. So it is vitally important for our new students in the autumn next year, when your PPD deadline falls, that you make sure you have the 3 credits and the 2 formal learning hours. So we can record breaks in your PPD. So for students who are off on parental leave, illness, career breaks, changing life circumstances, serious incidents, for example, we can record a break in your PPD. So if you don't have the required amount, then you won't be subject to those admin fees, as I've mentioned. If you think that you are in that particular circumstance, please do get in contact with the IFoA. So some really important things just to make you aware of, especially for those student joiners who have joined the IFoA in the last couple of months. Right, so I'm going to quickly show you now how to actually upload a PPD record. So I'm going to navigate away from the presentation onto the IFoA's website. So for those of you who are student members, you will already have your member area set up. For those who haven't joined yet, this is what you will see when you come to log in. So under the My Account section of the website, which I hope you can see, and Jane, please do tell me otherwise, go down to the bottom of the page here. So sandwiched between My CPD and My Exams is My PPD. So here is when you go onto your PPD portal. So some important things to show you here. Right at the top of the screen is your PPD recording period. So this is our test account. It's not a real student. And this test account, it joined the IFoA on the 14th of August. So if this were a real student, his PPD reporting period would be the 14th of August 2018 to the 13th of August 2019. So when you record your PPD, it shows up in this portal here. So you can see what you have recorded within your year. To add a new record, you select this button here, and that will take you to the submission screen. So say, for example, we are interested in recording an area under problem solving. You select the category that you want to record for, and then you select the competency that you are referring to from that shopping list. Within the activity description, as I mentioned, you give the brief description of what you have undertaken. So here you would just put description of the activity of what you have done. You put the date of that activity. So say, for example, we did this last week. So you'd put the date in there. If your activity is over a particular period, just select a date within that. And under the learning outcome, here is where we would expect to see the 100 to 200 words on reflecting on how that activity did. So here is where you would put the learning outcome content. Discuss with supervisors. So as I mentioned, this is a requirement of PPD that you make sure that you discuss that tick box with the supervisor. If the period comes to an end, so your deadline passes and that tick box isn't ticked, your credit will not be valid. So it is important that you discuss that with your supervisor. And then you click add. And this will add your PPD record to your logs. So if you go back into your PPD portal, you can see under problem solving, you've got that has been logged there. So if this were a real student, you could see, for example, he or she has 2 credits logged in the system and no formal learning hours. And in a nutshell, that is how to upload a PPD record. So for our current IFoA student members who have already joined us, my recommendation is you go into the your portal as soon as we're done here today, and you have a look to see when your reporting window is. If you're having problems viewing that, or if it doesn't look right to you, you can contact the IFoA, and then we will be able to tell you what is happening. So that is a demonstration of what the log looks like. And then brings me to the end of the PPD section of this webinar. So for all the information on PPD, you can go to the IFoA's website under Personal and Professional Development. You can have a look at the PPD guide. It was recently updated in the summertime, so it's up to date with a lot more information for you to have a look at. You can have there's some examples about how to submit logs and some more examples of good practice across the areas. It won't necessarily apply to you, but there's some information on the transitional arrangements from the old work experience regime called work-based skills, and a whole series of FAQs in terms of what PPD means to you. So if you would like, you can contact the Education Services team. So any questions on PPD, you can get in contact with them via email, or you can give them a call. If your inquiry is particularly complex, it will most likely come through to my team, which is the quality team, and we can look after you. So that takes us to the end of the both the PPD and Curriculum 2019 presentations, and I believe that we now have 20 minutes to have either pre-submitted questions, which I know Jane has, or people can type questions over. So I'll hand this back over to Jane to take us into the next section.
Thank you very much, Matt. Thank you. Yeah, so we've had some questions, so I'm going to go straight into those. So is there any guidance available on how the computer-based exams would be marked, Matt?
That's for me, Jane.
Oh, Chris, sorry. Yeah.
No, that's fine. We're going to produce a student guide. There is some guidance around the Excel that already exists, but we're going to produce a student guide on the marking of the R problem-based assessments. That's been worked on by those module teams that I mentioned in my presentation, and that'll be uploaded soon to the website. So yes, that's going to follow.
Brilliant, excellent. Thank you very much. Is there a required number of hours of formal learning in total for the fellowship? This is a question for you, Matt, I think.
Yeah, no, good question. So for previous students who were under the old work-based skills regime, they had to have 30 hours of experience logged. Now that is different for that under the PPD regime. So in answer to your question, as long as you have 2 formal learning hours per year, So as long as you have those 2 hours per year, that every year that you're a student member, that is the total. So technically the minimum is 6, because you have to have 3 years minimum, and it's 2 hours per year. So it is 6, but it has to be a minimum of 2 hours per year. So there isn't a grand total, so you can't cram all of your learning hours into 1 year at the end. As long as you've got your 2 hours per year, that will meet the requirements.
Right, okay, so I think that maybe answers how is formal learning different from the 3 PPD areas then?
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah,
it's also worth saying that that you as student members will have particular CPD requirements, and CPD is different to PPD. So it's important that students don't conflate the two things. So you have particular CPD requirements. Normally it's between years 3 and 5 that you are a student member, but they are different to your PPD. So formal learning hours, which is one of the areas, and anything to do with CPD that's part of your student membership, they are 2 different things. So it's important that students don't conflate the two.
Okay, so I think there was a bit of confusion there, as it was thought that this person thought that the PPD log didn't need to be updated annually.
Yep, so PPD records, as I mentioned, that is an annual requirement of your student membership. So you've got to make sure per year that you have 3 credits and 2 formal learning hours recorded. So, you know, in terms of the minimum amount, some competencies are worth 2 credits. So if you could do a 2 credit and a 2 credit and 2 formal learning hours, and that would be all your requirements for the year. So as I mentioned in the slide on the audits, each of you as student members will have your unique IFoA PPD deadline. It's really important that you know what that deadline is, because once that deadline passes, you cannot record from the previous year. So yes, absolutely, this is a requirement that all students every year of the IFoA have to complete their PPD requirements.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. I've been asked, can we have examples of formal learning?
No, absolutely. It's one of the things that isn't actually on the website currently, but we will be able to put some examples up there. Some of the things that we would expect under formal learning would be internal training courses. Things like IT programs are fine. So if you were learning how to use some modeling software, that would be more than acceptable. If there were any networking events that you went to, any conferences that you went to, if there were any webinars that you watched that were relevant to your sector or your field, that would be acceptable as well. So those are the types of things. But no, I do recognise that there currently isn't any examples, but we will be putting some up there in the next couple of weeks.
Perfect. Is CB3 roughly the same format as the old CT9? And same question for CA2 and the new CP2.
Yep. So on the CT9 CB3, the format will be the same. We use a number of external providers. So the University of Law, we use a company who produces the business simulation game, and we have another company that does the strategy and marketing material. We're just updating those, but the format will be the same. It'll be more like an online course where you're expected to complete certain tasks, work in teams, and then the assessment at the end will be exactly the same. So it'll be multiple choice online tests. There's no change to that. All we're doing is updating, revamping the materials. So format, content, just updated, but the structure the same.
Perfect, thank you, Chris. What exam or exams can non-members sit?
So the rules have changed. It used to be CT1, and so the non-member route going forward from January onwards will be CM1 and CS1. You choose between one or the other. Right.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Sorry, let me just get that one.
Actually, sorry, Jane. I didn't that question about CB3. I think there was another bit which was CP1 and CP2. Was it? Sorry, I didn't answer. I was conscious.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the exam format will be the same. The only difference, as I mentioned, is in CA1, the new CP1, there'll be this case study. But in CP2, it's the same format.
Okay, thank you. How does PPD how does PPD work for somebody who's opted for deferring their work-based skills?
So it depends. In short, it depends how long they've chosen to defer their work-based skills for. So from the 1st of September 2018, for those people who aren't planning on being on the 2018 qualifiers list, everyone else had to have moved over from work-based skills onto PPD by that particular point. So for brand new students who have joined us fresh off, this won't mean a huge amount to you. But for any existing students, if they've deferred their PPD, so if they've deferred their work-based skills, and they aren't planning on being on the 2018 qualifiers list, so for those people who passed their exams in December or in a position that they've passed all their exams, they now need to get all their work experience documentation in. By the 1st of September 2018, everyone else who isn't qualifying in 2018 should have moved over to PPD, and it very much depends on how many previous years you already have logged and when exactly you plan on qualifying. The actual webinar that we're running next may be actually more suitable, because that is for existing students who are moving from work-based skills over to PPD. By September 2020 exams, and once that qualifiers window comes to a conclusion, students, the work-based skills requirement is taken out completely and replaced entirely by PPD. If for that student in that particular circumstance, because I think it's too much detail to go into, considering a lot of new students won't really know what this is about, I'd recommend they contact Education Services as soon as possible to discuss their situation.
Okay, great, thank you. Will we be required to pass both parts of the CSCM exams, and also what will be the weighting of the paper exam and the online exam for the CSCM exams?
Okay, thank you, Jane. That's for me. The weighting is 70-30 for all the CSs and the CMs, and you will have to pass both the, I'm going to call them the A paper and the B paper, at the same time. So when you sit, let's say you sit CS 1, you'll get a mark, you'll be marked, your paper A will be marked and your paper B will be marked, but we will record only one single mark for that CS1 paper. But yes, you do have to pass them, you do have to take them and pass them at the same sitting.
Okay, thank you, Chris. If we're new students currently applying for membership who might have exemptions, do we apply for exemptions from the old exams, or will there be a new exemption form?
It very much depends on when you plan on doing it. So for students who know they've got exemptions, you have until the end of the year to apply using the current setup, and then in the new year, so from the 1st of January, there'll be a new exemption application form where you'll have to fill it in. And what that means for you, for example, is there'll be a form that will simply say, here are the new subjects and what they were under previously. So if you have an exemption from CT 4 and CT6, for example, that will get you an exemption from CS2, and you will simply fill in. So you can do it before Christmas or you can do it after. Doesn't really matter in terms of exactly when you need to do it. It will be simply a different form to do it on. For those who have exemptions under the old syllabus, you have until December 2023 to get that in. Though we recommend, of course, that you get it in sooner rather than later, so you know your position, but you can apply both before Christmas this year and into the next year. But there will be an ultimate deadline that will be in December 2023 for those students who have got exemptions under the old exam syllabus.
Okay, we've had quite a lot of questions on that, actually. So I'm just kind of going through those. I would suggest, if that is not clear, if you now type in your question and just put at the front, not clear, please can you explain this, because I've had a lot of questions on that, and obviously I'm trying to read them and trying to work out whether we've said that or not.
Is that just specifically on the question of claiming exemptions for university students?
Yeah, and just kind of mapping how things map onto old and new things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Fine. There is one slide in my presentation pack which students can look at, which is slide number 14, which shows what that mapping looks like. So that's from the old CT.
Yeah.
So those students who are holding CTs 1 to 8, they'll be able to see what they map across to in terms of the new curriculum, if that helps. Slide 14 on my pack.
Perfect. And you'll obviously have access to that. So yeah, just obviously I don't want to go through all of those, so just pop that in the question if you're still not sure about that. Could you confirm if there is an annual CPD requirement?
For student members, I don't believe there is. Not for the majority of students who join recently are what's called CPD category 5. So you have some requirements when you are either between your 3rd and 5th year, or when you qualify as an associate, whichever is sooner. So my recommendation is that students have a look at the CPD pages of the IFoA website, or contact the membership team at and I think it's membership@actuaries.org.uk. But no, students shouldn't have an annual CPD requirement, but I do recommend that students have a look at the CPD web pages, again, different to PPD, and that will tell you what you need to do.
Perfect, thank you. In terms of the order of exams, can the exams be taken in any order? I want to take the CP7 and CP8 exams first, followed by the others.
Yep, they can be taken in any order they like. There's no restriction on that. Of course, the way in which we have constructed the curriculum, there is a sort of a suggested order, if you like. So it makes sense to do your core subjects first. So that's the CSs and the CMs, followed by the CBs and then the CPs. We know that some students who go and work at their first company may be encouraged to take a specialist SP subject. So for example, someone who's gone from university is now working in pensions, then they may be encouraged to take SP4 because that's a pensions later subject, because it gives the context in which the student is working. But I think I wouldn't encourage students to do all the later subjects first and then come back to the earlier subjects. There are the core subjects, and it makes sense that you do those first, but there's no restriction. No, you can do them in any order you like.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect, thank you. And in terms of other exemptions then, so I have a question about MSc and insurance from CAS earning certain exemptions. Are there any courses in management for institutes outside the UK that are eligible for any exemptions? That's a case-by-case basis, I guess.
So yeah, absolutely. So my first point of call is always to suggest students to have a look at the exemption section of our website, and we list all the universities where we have agreements with, and you can see if your course is listed, and you can see what exemptions you may be eligible for. If, for example, you have gone to that university, but you haven't necessarily done the course that's listed on our website, you may still be able to apply based on certain modules that we expect students to sit to on our kind of official programs. But we know in certain modular-based universities, even if you haven't done the official course, you may have studied some of the modules that are within the agreement, and you may be subject to that. So first point of call, have a look at our website, and then see if your university and course is listed, and then if it isn't, you can get in contact with Education Services to discuss your options. If your course, if you studied at a university where there is no arrangement between the IFoA and that university, you are more restricted for the exemptions that you can apply from. So for those students who studied on any university, and if you have a mathematic or economics-based degree, you can currently get CT1, CT2, CT3, and CT7. And what you will need to do is download the IFoA syllabus for that particular subject, and you have to annotate where in your degree study you've covered that. And what most students do is they submit their module handbooks, their module outlines, their course handbook, and they cross-refer our syllabus onto those. But those are for only those CT subjects and for students who haven't attended one of our accredited universities. Under the new curriculum, that will be CB1, CB2, and CS1. And that's what you can apply for. So that's only for students who have done a mathematics or actuarial or economics degree that isn't listed on our website.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. For the exams which now have a computer element, will you be required to pass both by 60%, for example, or will it be 60% overall across both?
The pass mark will be calculated across both elements of assessment. So what I'm saying, I suppose, is you don't have to pass paper A and paper B. You'll be marked. Your papers will be marked, and the total will be aggregated. And then that will then determine whether or not you passed or not. So no, you don't have to pass each individual component.
Okay, thank you. Just one thing that doesn't seem to be clear, for long turnovers in applications, so non-accredited courses, does the exemption need to be granted by the 31st of December, or is that something that needs to be discussed individually?
So for the so if you're applying for a degree based on the coverage of the degree of your modules, if you want to apply for CT 1, 2, 3, and 7, that application must be received by the 31st of December. From the 1st of January onwards, you will need to map that to the new syllabus. So you'd have to map it onto CS1, CB1, and CB2. So you guys will need to make a judgment around whether or not you think you should map it onto the current syllabus, so CT 1, 2, 3, or 7, or from the 1st of January 2019 onto the new subjects. Of course, I wouldn't recommend trying to apply for CT 1 through that route if you don't have CT 5, because those are the two subjects that are merging, and it would just be a slight waste of your time.
Okay, great. We are coming to the end now. Just one more question. Also, we will be having a look at these questions, and they're questions which aren't answered today and obviously can be added into the FAQs. That's right, isn't it, Chris and Matt?
Yep.
Perfect. So just one more then. Is there more or less content to study in the new combined CT subjects?
Is there what, sorry?
Sorry, is there more or less content to study in the new combined CT subjects?
We would say that it's about the same. Yeah, that's what we've committed to. In some subjects there may be a little bit more, in some a little bit less, but across the board it's about the same.
Okay, perfect, great. So I'm afraid we will have to bring this to a close. Thank you very much to all of you for listening and all your questions, and we will look through those and check that they are covered on the FAQ, or you can contact the Education Services team, and the details are there on that slide. So thank you very much to Matt, and also for Chris for that very comprehensive overview. And the recording, as we said right at the beginning, will be available to you, and we'll send you an email just to let you know when that's available for you and where to find it. So thanks everybody, and I'm now going to close down the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone.